Hello and welcome to Unity Voices. And today I have another amazing guest, Dr. Olha Mukha. She is one of the co-founders of Resilience and Reconstruction Organization, but also she is a cultural strategist and international communication expert, shaping cross-border initiatives and creative network through cultural diplomacy and human rights leadership. Welcome to Unity Voices, Olha.
That's a pleasure for me to be with you.
Please share how the idea of creating this organization appeared and what is the main mission of your organization?
Yeah, I think that we created the initiative which supposed to be we're building now, and then which supposed to be quite big, not as just an opportunity, but rather as a necessity. Because what I can see, I live in London since 2017, so quite a bit of time. What I can see still that there are not enough Ukrainian experts represented, and quite often we have the situation that behalf of Ukrainians speak everyone else. Obviously, in 2022, the situation changed a bit, but not not on a high scale. And that was one of our focuses. And me and Steven Lacey and Thomas Brayford, when we tried to analyze, Steven is, by the way, he's great commercial anthropologist, and we work with him on a number of researches. And Thomas, he works for a few parliamentary commissions and also a great expert on policies. Myself, on the other hand, I have an academic background and still involved into researches, but also a lot of quite a long period already in culture and public diplomacy and in strategic communications. And when we try to analyze policies, we found out that there's no real basis how those policies been written. There are no real data. There are no field research, and people sometimes talking about things they have no idea about. I understand that contemporary politics is a bit like that, and the US shows quite a bad example right now. But what I really appreciate about the UK, that here still the academic voices, the research, the expert are valuable. And I thought, and we together with the colleagues thought that we need to establish something which fulfill this gap. So, for example, for our expert panel, we invite in over those people who are mostly other Ukrainians or have really deep expertise on Ukraine, who lived there a couple of years at least, not just visited a few times, who have their partners, for example, Ukrainian, and have very clear and close links, or who work professionally, who understand Ukrainian language or learning it, and who can give the really primary source testimonies, facts, and analysis. So this is, in short, probably in the background, was actually we met like seriously after organizing the event for women for Ukraine in the parliament last year. That was an amazing event. I still have here a lot of nice positive feedback, because remember what I prepared for that one, it's just very clear action points for MPs. What is low-hanging fruit, what is very easy to achieve, and what can give our win-win strategy, both for Ukraine and for the UK. And it appeared to be quite realistic, and I think that your colleagues amazingly represented it. So that was when we started to talk about that. And as an expert from slightly different but still the same area, we decided that we want to do things on a really professional level, to leverage deep research with high-level expertise, nurturing creative talents, especially involving those who are in Ukraine, and to catalyze transformation and resilience through urgent societal changes, which are actually became not only about Ukraine.
Yes, and I really appreciate that you mentioned about Ukrainian voices on UK stages, because the main purpose of Unity Voices when I created last year is to give a platform for Ukrainian voices, because from my experience, I visit different events, roundtables, panel discussions. There are Ukrainian voices, but very few. Mostly it's non-Ukrainian voices, and some people who consider them being experts just go into Ukraine once or twice, me being Ukrainian and displaced Ukrainian, and hearing sometimes and seeing what people do or say gives me motivation to give more space for Ukrainian voices. And this parliamentary event that has been held recently, it was quite powerful message in British Parliament. I want you to share how weaponization of culture by Russia affects Great Britain and what threats it has for UK.
Thank you for this question. Because I think that responding to it, I need to merge two events. First, it's culture of collusion, the Kremlin weaponization of art, faith, and influence we held in the parliament. Before, a week earlier, we launched the top lines of research on disinformation in the UK. That was amazing thing we've done. That, just to be honest, it's fully self-funded report that we started from a couple of focus group, and we realized that we can learn way more. So we expanded it. We added like conspiracy theories. We added, that's funny, but still very realistic and very reliable. We added as our control group like Russian propaganda channels followers. And that went, initially we were thinking about disinformation and probably like this conspiracy, a bit of Ukrainian. And then we found out that we're learning way more. We run through all the main parties with the Reform, National Liberals. Then what we received, that the outcomes of the research were sometimes totally unexpected. We learned which media people follow. We learned how they make their choices. But what we were amazed with, this is a number of propaganda narratives. It didn't matter which party people casted their votes for, but they were still very vulnerable to buy those propaganda narratives. And genuinely thinking that this is a very real knowledge, that they refer into the facts. It's just to give you a bit of understanding how ridiculous some of those facts in their understanding were. Someone mentioned that Yanukovych was very pro-European president, and then the Maidan happened for him not to follow this European road, for example, and this is why he had to flee to Russia, or how people were talking what the fact is. Like when we were asking them, what do you think the fact, how you defend the fact? And they said, if something appeared on a TikTok and been taken down within the next few hours, it's definitely the truth. If you read in the main media, you need to twist everything 180, that's going to be the truth. So I think that in our era of post-truth and in what's happening with the world politics, people feel very insecure in terms of what to believe in. And this is a very comfortable area to manipulate public opinion. I worked a lot in my daily job with public opinion research as well. And I can tell you that if you have enough money, good budget, you can twist the public opinion within a week. We can just make people believe something opposite. And with all the instruments, with an AI, with the people not having real skills on a critical thinking, a fact checking, it becomes easier and easier. And this is
It's
quite
actually the weapon. Russia uses propaganda as a war machine, and it spends billions to spread these narratives.
Propaganda is the weapon and always is an infrastructure of war. So if we're talking about hybrid war, which is happening now, and we can see all those attacks on Europe, which have, as for me, quite ridiculous reactions. And also at the same time, if coming back to the parliamentary event, Russia being very open about their weapon. Their famous filmmakers, and I don't want to mention names not to popularize them, their famous filmmakers just straightly open say that first I come with my movies, next Russia with our tanks, right? Next you see our army, next you see our green men. And this is how things happened. Because when people think about war, they think that it's in a traditional way, like Hitler, someone can announce the war, but even those times, it wasn't like that. It started from little operations, thinking, just checking if people will go to this denial stage. And this is what is happening right now. This is nothing new. What is new? This is a level of propaganda. And you are very right mentioning amazing, just the horrendous costs which are involved in this. This year, despite all the sanctions, despite all the economical challenges, and they really do have, if you just search very roughly the news from Russia, the main thing is, and it's ridiculous, not having an oil on the oil stations. Yeah, the country who lives on that. And despite all of that, they put the record amount of budget for propaganda itself, and it's more than all the previous years. And actually, it just became more and more since the full-scale invasion. And those are definitely billions. Just Russia today, over the 3 years, $1 billion from Russia's state to run what they're doing. So, and it's very easy to believe if you want to believe. It's quite easy because in this informational madness, you want to choose something you want to trust to, right? And also,
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, you want to find an expert or a channel, whoever that, okay, those guys are telling the truth. Or I decide to. I don't recall the name of the movie, but there was a Czech journalist, and they done amazing thing, which has to teach all of us. They took a few people from Czech, which didn't believe that war in Ukraine is a real thing. And they traveled them through the whole Ukraine, showing them Irpin, showing them Bucha, showing them Kharkiv. And when they got back, they seen everything in their real life with their own eyes. They were still hesitating to accept that.
Yeah.
They were not embracing the fact that it's real. They still stayed in this denial stage, which is, for me, very important fact to recognize that this is still a possibility.
Do you have any advice for people who are actually looking into information, not to become a victim of this propaganda, not to believe in things that are not true, and how to manage among all amount of information that we get? You know, they say who owns information owns the world. And it looks like Russia understands the value of them controlling all this information in their propaganda machine. But during this protest, we have been participating against Netrepko, which is also big mistake by giving a stage for Russian people, because they're using it for whitewashing and brainwashing. I was very surprised by the reaction of the guests Royal Opera House. So you assume these people are intelligent, these people are aware, but from their reaction and what they have been saying to us, it tells me even intelligent people can be confused with all the propaganda, whitewashing. So what main advices would you give to those people?
Oh, that's a big question. I joined both. I couldn't join the third one on a protest against Netrepko. And what was nice to monitor that there was a bit of a difference. On the first, there were quite a lot of people which were surprised, right? And most of those who came to the big opening, they were just running in their dark glasses. They felt very uncomfortable. We made everything to do that for them to feel that way. But also, I think that they were not really trying to interact. On the second one, some people which were coming in, they were like, we are not going to Netrepko. We are going to visit another show. So what at least we created with the first protest, that going to show Netrepko is joining is a shame. So even those people which were joining for whatever reason, but not that show, they felt very uncomfortable, and they felt the need to explain themselves. And I think that's already a big step, because we need to understand that we can't really counter Russian propaganda within a few years, because this is a big thing which was highly invested and thoroughly strategized starting from the end of the 9th century. So it's way longer than Ukraine received their independence, and now that we are fighting for our independence and fighting for our very agency on the cultural map as well and political map. Finally, people know where is Ukraine, and this is not a part of Russia. And they understand at least that there is a different languages and different cultures, but to gain this agency as a cultural entity, as a valuable culture, that's still a lot of work to be done. But if we are talking about media literacy, about the informational hygiene, even those people you see which were passing by, most of them, they didn't bother to read. Some were interested, and there are very little number of cases when people learned and they gave up their tickets, right? They're just single persons who decided to do that. And that's definitely not enough. If we are talking about Western audience and just in general about media literacy, it's first of all, it's regularly verifying the credibility and source of news, right? You need to go and then just be aware that Wikipedia is not the final and trustworthy source, because a lot of people can rewrite that. Second thing, and this is quite a big thing, this is a stop and assess emotional reaction to content. If you feel that you're reacting straight away, that this is written the way that you need to have this, emotional outburst,
Emotional involvement and reaction.
Yes, this is something off, right? Because those which particularly provoking outrage or excitement, you only share those after very careful evaluation, more analytically, more logically, more distanced in terms of emotions, right? You need to be aware also of filter bubbles and algorithm driven content. Even if you are, let's say, pro-Ukrainian, but for a matter of interest, you click in sometimes to listen what Russian analytics talk about, then the algorithm will push you more and more and more. Can you avoid that? Yes. For example, for those researches and experiments, use the anonymous tab on your computer or your phone, right? Protect yourself. But also our ability to analyze becomes lower and lower with the fast media consummation. Most of those people from our research, they had no idea where they heard the news. Oh, that was somewhere on TikTok, right? It was something on Facebook. But who said that? Have you verified that? No, no one. And this is quite an issue.
Issue is quite dangerous. When people consume information this way, then they spread these narratives, this propaganda. I've seen myself how it impacts, like the results of it for Ukraine and Ukrainians. And I think it's quite dangerous to consume information without double checking the sources and if it's actually true.
Six sources you need to find to state that the fact is the fact. And as well, the propaganda instruments they develop in a lot. Very basic thing is practicing the truth sandwich, so-called, right? When this technique requires that the sandwich misinformation between clear and truthful statements, and then correcting like some false claims in between. So when people hear like, oh, that's truth, and then you put there a little bit of moderating of their opinion, and in the general context, it feels very genuine. So those techniques improve, and especially when you consume a lot of information. Also, for this research, I had to monitor and follow a lot of like reform covering channels, which I would never do in my life if that would not require for work. You feel poisoned. You're losing your ability to see things clear. So even having sometimes like a basic information hygiene, at least one day a week without social media, without the screen, trying to keep the focus with a book, with magazines, with some things which require clear focus and analytical approach. This is how you keep yourself sane, I would say. So those sometimes very basic technically do work.
You mentioned books. Reading the books, what books would you recommend to read to understand Ukraine and Ukrainians better?
That was the thing that I tried to prepare some books to show you, but then it appeared that I have to transfer here half of my library. So I picked only those key ones, but they are really, really important. And honestly, it depends on what are your main interests. So, for example, if you are in art, so Ukraine produced a lot of very beautiful art books, which just give you the real understanding what the country and its culture is on a sensual level, on an aesthetic perception level. But also we have this beautiful, brilliant platform, Ukrainer. I'll start from the top. A few years ago, we when the full scale invasion started, we launched with the PEN International headquarter and PEN Ukraine this project Dialogues on War. It's in English, right? So those were series of webinar, like video conversation with a Ukrainian and world-known I don't know, Francis Fukuyama, Margaret Atwood, Arundhati Roy, Orkhan Pamuk, like big names, right? And we had it like year and a half. And then afterwards, I prepared a book, Dialogues on War. It's in Ukrainian, but it's been prepared to be published in English in Harvard Ukrainian Institute. Let's see how they will deal with now with the new Trump's politics, but everything is translated, prepared, running through the editing process, but still the videos are available on YouTube. The other is like Ukrainian. That's one of the greatest platforms, which tells about Ukraine, and they have country from the inside. That's very beautiful, an English book. And they just published Deoccupation by Bogdan Logvinenko. This is something to understand all those tensions, but also to understand east of Ukraine. I think that I haven't read nothing better than it was the novel by Tamara Horihazernia, Daughter. It's quite a scary book. But it's very real. It's very realistic about the internal relationship, and it's just very beautiful and nicely written fictional book. So if you don't bother yourself with reading the more historical or other books, this is a great choice. He is a Ukrainian, but also he works in the US, Canada, and other countries. The front line is brilliant reading as well to understand what's going on. Oksana Keys, one of my favorite Ukrainian researchers, The Survival as Victory. This is about I think, this is what we became. Or Courage and Fear by Oleg Hnatyuk. That's very strong book as well. This is it's very thoughtful, insightful, and also based on research. But if you want to read something more like stories, this is a beautiful book which is available on Amazon, and you can click and get it on your Kindle. Those are stories from Ukraine. Those are human stories, short stories. And this book has 3 parts. It's believers, fighters, and keepers, about 3 different generations of Ukrainians. And believers, those are the youngest, right? Those who keep those hope for future. Fighters, this is, as we all talk, that this war is a war of generation of 30s, 40s. And keepers, the elderly generation, which are those who preserve Ukrainian identity, culture, and a lot of those. And they're beautiful stories. I've written a few for this book as well. One of those about the girl who used to be in London and volunteered, and she came back to Ukraine. She dreamed to be an actress and became a translator for a military training base. And afterwards, she was so involved that she decided to go back to Ukraine, and she is running now a lot of voluntary, military-driven and focused initiatives. Or about Angry Mafkas, about the nonviolent resistance women's movement on the occupied territories. And those are amazing stories. Those are very inspiring stories. But also, for example, our colleagues, if you talk, I just added one non-Ukrainian book, but still, this is Luke Hardin, Invasion. I think that Luke done amazing job in terms of, we were even joking once that we meet usually in Kyiv, not in London, and we were bumping at each other usually on Yaroslavy Val or around Lvivska Square. And he's not the one who kind of visited twice and decided that he's an expert. He really devotes a massive amount of time and real focus. Or David Petrikarako's good friend of mine, I know that he's preparing his book on Ukraine. And this is a crazy guy. I remember his picture running through Bakhmut on crutches because he affected his leg with this big press. And I was like, this is a target, right? And but he is a war journalist, so he's kind of used, and he was amazed with Ukraine when he started his reportages from Ukraine. He was talking to me a lot about that's something very special what he sees in this war and in the people and their courage and their resilience as well. Or to understand the background, this is one of my favorite book, and probably my favorite hero from our 60s is Miroslav Marinovich. The universe behind barbed wire. And this is a beautiful book, also painful, because you understand that the person just spent half of his life in a different time of camps and prisons just because he wanted to be Ukrainian, nothing more than that. But yeah, I will not bother you with my library because we'll never end this conversation. So I should say that there are plenty of really great authors and important books. However, there are some books which should be considered very carefully. It's not always written by people who have a genuine interest and a relevant expertise, I would say.
Thank you for sharing your recommendations. It was very useful for me as well. I will definitely take your recommendations, and I recommend everyone to join me. And you are right. It's very crucial, actually, to understand the background of person writing the book, to understand the background of the message in this book and the value or harm it can make in general. And what about films? What films you can recommend to watch? Or maybe there is some film that touched you deeply that you can share?
I think that last one which I've seen, and it's highly recommended, it's 2000 meters from Andriivka. And I think that what Mstislav doing, it's just amazing how he grows with those movies. I think that also from the Mariupol story to this one, it's a massive leap in terms of it's so delicate work with the very difficult material. And I was amazed how he told those stories with such love for human, but also transferring the understanding of the motivation of those people on the front line. And also how he involved this story of the forest which been there for always, and where each single day getting another 5-10 meters costs people's life, and then how they talk and how they still optimistically approaching this. And when Mstislav was talking, like when the journalist was talking to them and asking, like, how do you feel when this Andriivka, there's nothing left? He's like, and that's great because we got rid of all those Soviet, heritage. We can build a new village that would be only ours. That would be the best and most beautiful village in the world. So, and this future looking, this is one of this part of, I think, Ukrainian soul. This is somewhere in our DNA. Then when we are coming through our ups and downs, we do appreciate our ups, and Ukrainians are well known for love to celebrate everything in a really big scale, right? Because we know that life is too short, life is too unpredictable, and we value all those little things. And on the other end, through our downs, we know that this is never the end. We were fighting this war not even 11 years. We fighting this war hundreds of years.
It's interesting that you mentioned Mstislav Chernov because guests last year, almost all my guests were recommending to watch 20 Days of Mariupol.
Of course, the Oscar winner as well. But I want also to get your attention to Irina Tsilik. She's amazing. She is young, but I think a very productive author. And for example, her The Earth looking the orange, that's very, very delicate and I think gentle movie. And this is something that you can approach the very core of Ukrainian soul. Sometimes I would say that movies like Luxembourg, they have a cool heroes, they're funny, but they still represent some kind of Ukrainian reality. And then I think that obviously that's a shame that we mostly talking about movies about war.
That's
And
our reality.
yeah,
That's the reality
unfortunately.
we live in.
So Winter on Fire, another movie which was released just a few months ago. It's a People of the Color of Freedom. It's a movie, very strong one about the resistance on the temporarily occupied territories, which just gathers all those stories of people. And those are mostly public story, but not public people. And this, I think that this is what is special about us and makes us very different from Russia. We have no this policy of like small people who did not decide anything. We know that each of us decide, and this is all about the being together. And this is about the input of each single one, and otherwise we would absolutely not exist anymore in our history. Invisible Battalion, this is an amazing movie about women in war as well. And Cuba and Alaska, oh my goodness, how I could forget. I was curating the photo exhibition in our museum, Territory of Terror in Lviv, with showing the daily life of women in the army, and Cuba was one of the heroines. She's amazing. And Cuba and Alaska, this is a very funny movie, and their conversation, their dialogues, how they approach. But this is two young girls which are fighting the war, which are barriers. And that's a great movie to watch as well.
I think that humor is Ukrainian weapon to survive in this war as well. In life, in books, in films, and it's one of our Ukrainian superpowers.
For sure. That's a good thing. That I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think that it's our main and very healthy coping mechanism. Like whatever happens, we already have a folder with memes about those events, right? I'm still running this exhibition on Ukrainian resistance, which is called Unseen Force. You can watch on the website, because we created also the video tour and a lot of information. And one of the favorite parts, because the exhibition is massive, it has 13 different sections. One of the favorite parts, especially of young people, is memes. And I worked with Serhiy Zakharov, who was first of those artists who publicly suffered, and he was being tortured for his paintings, how he was mocking the occupiers. And the second there was Maxim Palenko, who is amazingly talented Ukrainian author, and he created a number of totally viral memes as well, and he's serving on the front line now. So, and this is very important to understand, that this war is taking our biggest talents.
And going back to this documentary, 2000 Meters to Andriivka by Mstislav Chernov, when I was at screening, I could hear people laughing and crying both sometimes at the same time, because even soldiers on the front line, being like really close to danger, death, they still find this way of joking, and it feels very alive when you watch it, like you feel very connected to the people. And I believe everyone has to watch this documentary, like to walk these 2000 meters, to feel it, to see it, to feel the pain, to see the sacrifices, what we're actually fighting for. And it's not just a piece of land, and to see the price for each meter we have to fight for, how many lives has been taken. And also in this documentary we can see some funerals and the family members of fallen soldiers, and they say heroes, they do die. And it's true that we are losing one of the best Ukrainians during this time, and these are real heroes that are dying. And also what was very important for me to hear from Slav, because it's something I share during my speeches as well, is about indifference. I believe that indifference can kill as much as evil, because most Russians are indifferent, and this is the main reason why this war happened and continues to happen. And I also read about one research that was showing that all these civil wars, genocide, wars were happening and happening now is because of indifference, because people who know and are aware about what is happening, they choose to remain silent. And this is why it is so important for us to raise awareness, to be loud for those who don't have voice, who are on occupied territories, those who are in Russian captivity, those children who have been abducted and stolen by Russia, and they don't have voice, they don't have power to speak for themselves. And everyone who has this power, has this freedom, we all have to be united to give them voice.
That's so true, because I strongly believe in saying that the only thing which is needed for evil to win is for good people to do nothing. And this is why I think that it doesn't matter where you live today, it doesn't matter who you are, but this is our shared responsibility today. And for some people, it's difficult to acknowledge. They don't want to get out of their comfort zone, of course, but they will be pushed otherwise, because for them, war in Ukraine, how they call it, instead of Russia against Ukraine, it's just an annoying thing because of the rising of living costs, because they only realized that Ukraine has quite an important role in a world supply chain, that the wheat comes from Ukraine, that each second bottle of oil comes from Ukraine, the honey comes from Ukraine, that Ukraine was feeding half of the African continent and a MENA region. This is annoying to learn that, right? It takes an effort. Unfortunately, not everyone is willing to take this effort.
Yes, that's true. And do you have advice or your favorite quote that encourages you and can inspire others?
I maybe think about Victoria Melina, dear friend of mine. She was also from Lviv, and her book, I can't finish her book, honestly. It hurts too much right now. But I still remember her poems, and I remember when it was actually in London a couple of years ago in British Library, when one of the journalists asked, like, what were done personally to you? And Vika smiled and said, it turned me into a poet. And because she never written any poems before, she was a novelist, a great novelist, to be honest. And she started writing poems. And one of the poems, which is translated into English, I'll maybe quote it if you allow me. And I'm going there too, where I already know everyone in the city. And all of its dads are my dad. And all the survivors are my sisters. Can't talk about the man who survived. He too was detained by them. He can testify about the tortures. I knock on his door, but his neighbors comes out. She answers for him. It only seems like he survived. Go and talk to the woman. And it has for me such a deep dimension of, and it's very important testimony of Victoria herself and what she was doing as well. And I think that what keeps me on being a human. That's another of our dad artists. It's Maxim Kravtsov. And I think that his most famous quote is that when I'll be asked what the war means, I would tell names of people. And I think this is the key of our culture, of our survival, our resistance, that we care about our dad and our life. That was a quote which I put as a motto of the Unseen Force in the exhibition, that it's not about territories, it's about people. And human is in the core center of everything. And this is also what we share as a very important value with Steve and Thomas is coming back to the beginning of our conversation in resilience and reconstruction, that you should be expert, you should be an analyst, but value is a thing which united us, whatever challenges are we coming through. So yeah, I think that people, love for people, despite everything, and maybe thanks to everything.
I was about to ask you, what is your superpower? Is this love to people?
I think that my superpower is this very vivid energy that I can spread, and I'm very generous with it. I'm a person with a high emotional metabolism. I take a lot, but I share very generously a lot. Ideas, energy, and I can gather people together and think about things and do things to make things done. This is very important for me as well. And my daughter, then when the girl raised in London says I'm Ukrainian and reads Harry Potter in Ukrainian translation because states that it's better, I think that means something.
You've done a good job. The
I
mother.
was
Thank you for sharing your personal stories, for actually becoming a co-founder of such important initiative like reconstruction and resilience.
we have quite wild expertise, right? So we not only work on disinformation, but also and counter-narrative developments. We also work in fact-checking methodology, informational hygiene trainings, and behavioral change, silence, and this informational resilience and media literacy. But also, as I'm coming from strategic comms and cultural diplomacy, this is also in our capacity, like cross-cultural and social development, and including mental health and disability inclusion and integration, because I think that Ukraine becomes a leading country on those issues, and this becomes like part of also our human-centered society, I would say.
I remember when I first came in London, my first impression was about inclusivity, and realizing back then it was like 2 months after full-scale invasion, I thought that it would be such a good idea if London can share their expertise of being more inclusive in terms of city for people. But the way I see how Ukrainians are getting adaptive, and this is this real superpower of these superhumans, and their resilience and still their approach to life is really inspiring. So I think they are the one who should share their expertise and how to live in this new world we're living in.
I'm really glad that Steve is in our team, because he's the one who is a primary source and who can talk a lot and share. And also, he's an expert on inclusivity. So it adds us quite a massive advantage in terms that we not only know what we are talking and working on, but we feel it.
Steve, not just disabled person who a good expert to give this message. I also know he was a victim of Russian propaganda, so he knows how it feels. He knows exactly how it feels to be
Very much.
influenced, so he can share his personal perspective. Ola, thank you for joining me today at Unity Voices.
Thank you for Unity Voices, and thank you for giving those voices to Ukrainians, because I fully share your sentiment about that we need to give voices to those who genuinely belong.
And unity is our superpower. So let's stay united, and together we will win.
That's for sure. Together we will win. And this is our shared responsibility today, isn't it?
It is.
Thank you.